Hi, I'm from the government, and that's how you know you can trust me. Whatever I say is not for political gain or expediency, but it's so that you, the citizen, can make an informed decision about what you have no choice in. Today, I'd like to tell you about the Russian problem, or as we're calling it here at the Red Menace. See, the Russians want to take over our country. How? Well, not so quick, John Q. Citizen. First, you have to understand why. They hate the freedoms you used to enjoy before we had to take them away to protect you from them. If you ever want to see your rights restored, report your neighbors for Russian activity. Signs include drinking vodka, wearing furry hats, and an affinity for beets.
Well, I'm confused, mister. How are they a problem?
I'm glad you asked, not at all scripted person from the public. It's so stunningly complicated, it's blindingly simple. The Kremlin, or as we like to call them, the Gremlin, will hire someone to hack email belonging to one of the most trustworthy and important parts of our union, the Democratic National Committee. They'll then put the blame solely on this lone hacker, but we at know better. It's the Ruskies' attempt to pull one over on old Uncle Sam. How do we know? We don't do evidence, so you'll just have to trust us. It's like faith, and we all know how important that is.
But I'm a cynical coward and possibly a traitor to the faith that glues our country together. I'd like some evidence.
No one likes a doubting Thomas, little girl. Your neighbors, the Jones, entirely agree with us, and we agree with us, and we'll all be watching your every move for machete and mainframe purchases for all that hacking you might be doing. If that's not enough, look at this. Isn't that damn majestic? Your doubts and cynicism will lead to this.
Well, I hadn't looked at it that way. If I see something, I'll say something.
Paid for by the committee to get Chelsea Clinton elected. While candidate Trump moaned about the election being rigged, it kind of was. The media stood steadfast that our voting booths could not be tampered with. They can be. But when they say the Russians interfered with our election, they don't mean by changing vote tallies or some other direct or even salient action, do they? The claim is that the Russians hacked the DNC. WikiLeaks released that information. People learned the truth about the Hillary campaign train. So WikiLeaks is somehow part of a Russian plan to undermine Hillary Clinton. Which is really funny, by the way, to people who are familiar with Julian Assange. They also claim that Russia was putting out false information on the interwebs, which, oh no, we suddenly can't trust everything we read on Twitter and Facebook, and then report as real news. As of this video, we have yet to see one shred of actual evidence released that the Russian government hacked the United States election. Various entities, from senators to corporations to political action committees, are hit regularly by individual hackers and groups across the globe. I goddamn guarantee you that aside from those evil Reds, these groups are also hit by the Chinese, the Ukrainians, the Koreans, Germans, and even us Americans. The fact that IP addresses are associated with a specific country, like Russia, though no evidence of even that has ever been seen, does not mean their government was involved. I was directly responsible for servers hosted around the US as well as Australia back in 2001, and we were hit by the Russians daily. It's like a sport over there. So let's start at the beginning of this rehash of McCarthyism. Marcel Guccifer Lehel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name right. I don't really care. This Romanian claimed he hacked Hillary Clinton's email server, and furthermore, it was easy. Nowhere I searched on this offered real information. Many even highly suggested it wasn't done at all, which is possible. He may have been trying to use the claim as leverage while sitting in a jail cell in Virginia after being extradited from Romania. He probably saw the controversy on TV and thought his claim might be plausible enough for a plea deal, considering his own hacking history. But that's all conjecture at this point. Considering my own technical background, it's unlikely her server was not hacked at some point. I bring him up because I think it gave both the idea and future credibility to claims about the Russians. But after that, the DNC was hit. It was bad enough that Mrs. Clinton was made to look like what many considered an incompetent criminal with her email server and sending classified documents. But the DNC hacks? That was huge. Starting in June of 2016, someone posing as Guccifer 2.0 was claiming credit for breaking into a database hosted by the DNC. It showed nothing but what was expected. Unethical, backroom deal behavior. From their internal plans to undermine the Bernie Sanders campaign, which led to Debbie Wasserman Schultz stepping down as DNC chair, to cold, calculated, elaborate setups to pull money from wealthy donors, and even setting up seating at tables based on how much the DNC thought they could massage out of them. And John Podesta? He deserves a solo video on how corrupt, vile, and disgusting that man is. While I saw some outlets questioning the validity of the emails released from hacking the DNC, only one official from within did, Donna Brazile. And here's the funny thing about the scary thing we call evidence. If we, John Q. Public, get our hands on it, we can tell if it's legitimate. 100,000 people would immediately spend hours working on it, sharing our findings online and crowdsourcing legitimacy. And the emails that went through her, such as her feeding Hillary Clinton debate questions in advance, which she received as an analyst for CNN, were entirely legitimate. Being a dumbass, she kept on the line until rather recently that the emails were altered, finally admitting her failures in March. Of course, nothing in the emails was altered. The lights came on, the roaches scattered, and then they started talking in the shadows about how to convince the people to turn the lights off and look to Russia to blame for anyone seeing the infestation in the first place. I mean, sure. The DNC were a bunch of unethical pricks hell-bent on keeping the status quo and getting all that foreign money, arguably attempting to sway the U.S. election by sabotaging primaries. And they didn't generally deny any of that. But Russia? Well, they tried to mess with our election. Not the DNC. We didn't do nothing. Is it possible that it was the Russian government? Sure. But those intelligence agencies, from the FBI to the CIA and the private companies in between, have to prove it. They're making unsubstantiated claims that are putting us back to this.
Remember what to do, friends. Now tell me right out loud. What are you supposed to do when you see the flash? Duck and cover.
Now, recently, Michael Flynn asked for immunity to testify before Congress. You know, that guy who was fired in the first few weeks of the Trump presidency because he lied directly to his boss. I would have canned his ass as well. This whole attempt to get immunity thing is a little puzzling. It certainly makes him look guilty, but the whole thing to me stinks of him being afraid of being on the wrong side of an IRS audit. Salon and Washington Post, your God help me, apparently kind of agrees with me on this, which is a little concerning. Now, speaking of those intelligence agencies, you might want to familiarize yourself with a recent WikiLeaks document dump in March. Basically, according to the documentation released, the CIA can and does fake foreign intelligence agencies' hacking attacks, leaving every necessary fingerprint behind to cast blame in the wrong direction. If they wanted to make Russia think Merkel is trying to get into their systems, they could easily make that happen. I'm not saying they covered their tracks with Russian IP addresses after checking out the DNC's relations to possible corruption, say, within the Clinton Foundation, let alone Podesta's ties to the Kremlin, but they could have, and we'd never be privy to that information. At least we know they weren't behind Trump's previous non-scandal with the Russians, playing water sports in a Moscow hotel with prostitutes, which, of course, was just some of that fake news I hear so much about. The CIA is not that creative. But let's go back to progressive la-la land and pretend for a moment that it certainly was the Russians. In fact, it was Putin himself with a 1986 Beat-powered laptop developed by the KGB. I can't fathom how it would help the Russians to get Trump elected. In fact, it mostly hurt them to have Trump as president. Hillary Clinton worked with the Russians, or in the case of up to 20% of American uranium extraction, at least didn't stand in their way. John Podesta, the chairman of the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign, reportedly took $35 million from an organization directly funded by the Kremlin and tried to launder it through a shitty little energy company no one ever heard of. This took place in 2011 while he was an advisor to the then Secretary of State Clinton. Bill Clinton got over $500,000 from an organization in Moscow that claims huge ties to Russian intelligence. The Clinton Foundation took in money from people who were actively working with or were previous members of the Russian government. But Trump, a businessman who probably has done business in Russia but lacks any real political ties, one of the very things that's hurting him as president is who we should look at for malfeasance and international governmental corruption. Trump, who is talking about rolling back trade deals, whose party wants us to focus more on oil, driving prices down and hurting Russia's second largest export, the first being memes on shirtless men riding bears. The left keeps saying Trump would be a stooge for the Kremlin. But to what possible end? We already ignored their Crimean push, ignoring the cries of the Ukrainians, as well as gave up our missile defense shield in Europe, all under President Obama. But sure, it must be all those promises Trump made to catch the creators of the Rocky and Bullwinkle show and bring them to justice on behalf of the Soviets. Hey, give me a goddamn break. Look, what I'm about to say is entirely my opinion, educated as I think it is, and should not be taken as gospel. First and foremost, the left uses a strategy above all else for accountability and victimhood cash grabs. Whatever they're guilty of, blame the outgroup for it instead. It works in government, it works on the social level, and it works with every conversation. The progressive stack wants segregation and for society to jump on board the victim cash train. Call white people the racist, blame them. Think it's not fair that men and women are biologically different? Blame society for rampant sexism and deny any differences we, by nature, have. Use rhetoric you know damn well could start another Cold War with Russia to shrug off responsibility for extreme internal corruption that saw the harsh light of day. Blame Trump. The DNC hacking exposed a lot of skeletons in a lot of closets. People who owned those closets had a lot to lose. Do you think for 1 minute they weren't going to throw people under the proverbial campaign bus? Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Huma Abedin? Anthony Carlos Danger Wiener? You think they would accept their Clinton meal ticket losing the election without finding a scapegoat? That's not how politicians play the game. Random person on the internet I'm talking to. Podesta, Wasserman Schultz, Abedin, Donna Brazil, and many more would have been guaranteed high-level positions in the government. The Clinton Foundation, instead of shriveling into obscurity as it has, would have become an unstoppable money laundering scheme with Chelsea Clinton at the helm, giving her clout for her own political career. Just as a fun exercise, can you imagine if you tried the Russian defense at work? Maybe you're skirting your job duties and have been for a little while, maybe even using the company credit card for a little personal time at some massage parlors. Your boss finds out, confronts you about it, and you say, yeah, well, I can't deny any of that, but you only know about it because Jill in HR was looking at my hours and receipts. She's the problem. And your dumb fuck boss actually investigates her for interfering with your job duties. That's the entire Democratic argument in a nutshell. This entire fiasco is a distraction, and likely is a lie. And as with all lies, it has expanded exponentially into more lies and deceit. However, the Clintons and DNC members were so connected in our government, and so much money was being moved around, and so many more skeletons are still hidden, just waiting for a little blackmail, that they won't be happy until they can at least get one guilty verdict out of one Trump associate, so the citizenry may once again think the Democrats are clean. It even comes with the added benefit of undermining the presidency in the rival party to hurt their chances for re-election, including the congressional seats. It's a win-win-win. Joseph McCarthy would be proud. At the end of this, No real evidence of any serious collusion with a foreign nation to somehow topple Western democracy will be seen. A few slimy business deals, a couple of coffees with the ambassador of Russia, and a whole new Cold War are all we're going to get for Congress playing the virtue signaling game on our dime.